Genesis 16, verse 3, is a verse from the Bible that describes a key event involving Abraham, Sarah, and Hagar. In this verse, Sarai, later known as Sarah, the wife of Abram, later known as Abraham, gives her Egyptian maidservant Hagar to Abraham as a wife to bear children, as Sarah had not been able to conceive. This action marks a significant moment in the narrative, as it leads to complex family dynamics and consequences in the story of Abraham and his descendants. Genesis 16, verse 3 reads, "And Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, her maid, the Egyptian, after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan, and gave her to her husband Abram to be his wife." Deuteronomy 21, verses 15 to 17, is a passage from the Old Testament of the Bible that addresses the rights of a man concerning his sons, particularly in the context of inheritance. The verses outline conditions for a man who has two wives, one he loves and one he does not. The law states that when dividing his inheritance among his sons, he must not favor the son of the loved wife over the son of the unloved wife. Instead, he should acknowledge the firstborn son, regardless of the mother's status. This passage emphasizes fairness and the importance of honoring the firstborn in matters of inheritance. Deuteronomy 21, verses 15 to 17 reads, "If a man have two wives, one beloved and another hated, and they have borne him children, both the beloved and the hated, and if the firstborn son be hers that was hated, then it shall be, when he maketh his sons to inherit that which he hath, that he may not make the son of the beloved firstborn before the son of the hated, which is indeed the firstborn. But he shall acknowledge the son of the hated for the firstborn, by giving him a double portion of all that he hath. For he is the beginning of his strength. The right of the firstborn is his."
Belief that the Abrahamic covenant was fulfilled through Ishmael rather than Isaac, including the promise of land from the Nile to the Euphrates and the blessing to all nations through Abraham's seed, is held by some, particularly within Islamic tradition. Here's a more detailed articulation of their argument: Ishmael and the covenant. 1. Ishmael as the firstborn. Supporters of this view argue that Ishmael, being Abraham's firstborn son, was the original heir to the covenant. They emphasize that Ishmael was the first child of Abraham, born to Hagar, Sarah's Egyptian maidservant. 2. Sacrifice narrative. They contend that the narrative of Abraham being asked to sacrifice his son originally referred to Ishmael, not Isaac. This is based on the belief that ancient scriptures were altered by Israelite scribes to emphasize Isaac's role. 3. Blessing and land promise. The promise of land from the Nile to the Euphrates and the blessing to all nations is seen as applying to Ishmael's descendants. Islamic tradition views Ishmael as an ancestor of the Arab peoples, and thus sees the fulfillment of these promises through the Islamic Hajj and in the rise of Islamic civilization. Scriptural alteration argument. 1. Scribal changes. They argue that ancient Israelite scribes altered the scriptures to shift the focus from Ishmael to Isaac. This was done to establish a theological foundation for the Israelites' claim to the land and their unique covenantal relationship with God. 2. Evidence from Quranic texts. The Quran refers to the story of Abraham and his son, implying that Ishmael was the one to be sacrificed. This, combined with historical accounts and interpretations, is used to argue for the primacy of Ishmael in the covenantal promises.
What was the rationale behind the prophet's decision to present his firstborn instead of his other sons, as detailed in the Bible? Micah 6, verse 7. The verse reads, "Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul?" The rationale behind the prophet's decision to present his firstborn instead of his other sons in Micah 6, verse 7 is likely based on the cultural and religious significance of the firstborn in ancient Israelite society. In many ancient cultures, including Israelite culture, the firstborn held a special status and had certain privileges and responsibilities. This included being the primary heir to the family's inheritance and having a special connection to the divine. By offering his firstborn, the prophet may have been trying to convey the seriousness and gravity of the situation. This action would have been a powerful symbol of sacrifice and devotion, as the firstborn was typically seen as the most valuable and cherished among the children. It could also be seen as a way of emphasizing the depth of the prophet's regret and repentance for his transgressions, as offering one's firstborn would have been an unimaginable and incredibly difficult act for any parent.